Hi, Sharon, and welcome back to the Awaken Your Wise Woman podcast. I'm so happy to have you back. I think, is this the third time on the podcast, perhaps?
Perhaps. I'm not sure either, but it's wonderful to be here and it's great to connect with you and everybody listening. I'm really happy to do it.
Yeah, I always love our conversation so much. So, listeners, if you haven't heard the other episodes with Sharon, they will be included in the show notes. But Sharon, for people who might not know who you are, could you share a little bit about yourself and yeah, the what you do, the work you do?
Sure, sure. So I'm a licensed clinical social worker in California, and the work that I do is primarily in supporting adult children who have come from dysfunctional families of all, shapes and sizes and flavors of that. Um, so I work as a psychotherapist in clinical practice, and I am also an author, and I've written several different self-help books. The newest one is Cutting Ties with Your Parents, which we'll talk about some of those themes today, I know, and just the challenges of um, ending toxic or abusive relationships and what that can look like. And I also am a highly sensitive person, and so we can weave that into our conversation as well. And that's definitely a big component of the work that I do. I was telling you, Biz, that I think I tend to attract clients who, and maybe readers as well, who tend to be more sensitive as well. And so I definitely see those themes in the work that I'm doing and, try to at least bring it into some of the writing that I do. And I think it definitely informs the approach that I take with my clients and just the way that I navigate my own life and challenges as well, and try to put things into practice that support my sensitivity as well, and even just my process of accepting that that's part of who I am and the challenges and benefits that that brings.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I feel like a lot of your books, well, they might not name high sensitivity outright, but they're always written in such a gentle
Mm.
fashion that I feel like it lands well, at least for me anyway. It doesn't ever feel judgmental or, shaming or, it just feels really, yeah, just sort of a soft way to approach very sometimes challenging topics.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I mean, it really means a lot to me because that's definitely something that I strive for. And I think we all need more of that, is to feel seen and understood and validated and know that the way that we are, our traits and our experiences and our feelings matter. I think that's so core to, you
Yeah.
know, feeling good about ourselves and being able to do the things that we want in our lives.
So true. So true. I'm curious when you learned about or knew that you were highly sensitive.
Oh, I don't know exactly. I would say no, I mean, I was pretty well into adulthood, I would say. At
Me
some
too.
point, it was when I read Elaine Aron's book.
Mm,
Um, I don't know, probably sometime in my late 20s, I would guess. I'm not sure. Um, and it just like it clicked. I remember crying at parts reading that book. It was just like, oh my gosh, like somebody finally
you
gets it.
see
Like
me,
somebody's like,
right?
yeah, like you're telling me, like, this is me.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. I mean before that, I mean I knew I was sensitive. I mean I was told from early on as a child that I was sensitive. So it wasn't that I didn't know I was sensitive. It was I didn't know that
Yes,
this had a name and that there were other people who had this
exactly.
sensitivity trait, and where it came from, or the
Hmm.
ability to, I think, maybe frame it in a more positive way, because it definitely felt, for me, and I know this is true for so many folks, that, growing up, that it was really a criticism. You're too sensitive.
Right,
You're
right.
crying too much. You're, feeling too much. Um, so for
Yeah.
her to be able to, um, yeah, help me see that, okay, this isn't just a negative thing. This isn't something that you need to be ashamed of or you need to fix about yourself. But instead, it's like, how do you work with it
Mm.
and, um, create some buffers, some boundaries in your life so that you can protect yourself, but also hold on to the stuff that's really good about being sensitive and not, right, lose our empathy and our ability to connect and to feel and be creative and a lot of those really great aspects of it.
Yeah. Well, I feel like too, um, your other two books, besides the one we're going to focus on more today, can speak directly to the highly sensitive person's experience, right? Like the struggle with boundaries, struggle with perfectionism, wanting to make sure you're getting it right so that you don't feel all the things, right?
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, you're very right. I mean, and again, I think that's because I tend to write books that that I think will be helpful to other people, but they're also very much the books that I need to write
Right?
for myself, right? It's the classic, healing yourself
Yes.
component of the work that we do is um
Yeah.
yeah, wanting to be, wanting to research and understand, aspects of my own self as well. And then again, I think it's really nice to be able to share that with other people, feeling like, okay, I've figured out some things that work for me and that work for my clients around these issues and struggles. And now I
Oh,
can,
yeah.
provide this to other people through the books that I write as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, I feel like as we learn and heal ourselves, we then are so much able to be empathetic, but also share whatever wisdom we've gained along the way, for sure.
Yeah.
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 So I know this most recent book, I think for a lot of people, the idea of, becoming estranged or creating that break with family can be super challenging, even when those relationships are damaging, toxic, hurtful, and, basically injure you while being in relationship with those people. I'm curious how, and I don't know if you know this, but have you gotten feedback from readers in terms of like, oh, thank goodness somebody's finally talking about this? Or like, because I feel like it's such a delicate subject and one that doesn't get talked about that much.
It is a delicate subject. I think there is still a lot of taboo and shame around it. More people are talking about it. And so there is more awareness that is coming to it, but that stigma still persists. Um,
Yeah.
Often I will, use the analogy of divorce as something in our society that has become quite widely accepted. And I think the stigma and the shame that people feel about getting divorced is much, much less than it was, oh, I don't, 20,
Yeah.
30, 40 years ago.
Right.
Um, and my hope is that this is going to follow that similar path, but we're much further behind. But again, sort of the same idea of sometimes relationships can't be healed. Not all relationships can become functional and happy and good for us. And so sometimes there are going to be, a subset of relationships, whether they're marriages or parent-child relationships or friendships or whatever, um, that we do need to end for our own well-being. And um,
Yeah.
and right, and when we can, not just personally, but as a community, also accept that sometimes that's inevitable and sometimes that's a healthy choice for people to make, I think then we can move away from the stigma and the shame that's part of what keeps people stuck.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I know I have a few clients that I've worked with over the years where there was whether, well, often it's from other family members, like you should be whatever, kinder to your parents or grandparents or aunts and uncles or whoever it is within that family. And the pressure to continue relationships, even when it's very clear they're harmful. And that's so hard. Like, I just, obviously I'm there to support them and the decisions that they're making, but I see the impact of the societal sort of pressure to be nice anyway, even if they're
Yeah,
hurtful.
yeah. I mean, you're right. I mean, people feel so much pressure. There's, kind of this outer layer of it that I think comes from, the community, the wider community or society in general, all those messages that we get,
Hmm.
the things that we learn about the way we're supposed to interact with our families, right? Things like what you were saying is, um, these are the most important relationships. Nobody's more important than your family is to you.
Yeah.
Family's always going to be there for you.
Blood is
Um,
thicker than
Blood is
water.
thicker than water. Exactly. Things along those lines that reinforce this idea that these are the most important relationships, and almost that there's no circumstance in which it's okay to break those ties, right? They are supposed to endure forever.
Right.
Right. And then, as you were saying, people often get additional pressure from their friends and their family who
Oh,
don't understand the specific dynamics within their family. And they also continue to put on the pressure, second guessing the decision, saying, oh, maybe it's not that bad, or maybe you could give them another try, or you're
they
going to
didn't mean to hurt you.
right. You're going to regret it when your parents are gone.
Yes, yes,
Um,
yes.
right. You need to forgive them. There's a lot of, very specific messages that people often get as well that just discounts their feelings, discounts their experiences, and again leads to feelings of guilt and feelings of shame for making the decision or sometimes even considering the
Yeah,
decision of taking some space. They're very much told that you're doing something wrong. You're a bad person. You're a bad daughter. You're a bad um, sister or brother.
yeah,
Right. So that really reinforces those feelings, leaving people feeling isolated and alone. And again, the shame and the guilt are such common themes that people bring up when they're struggling with this. And then
yeah,
unfortunately, that compounds the problem is, that pressure and those negative messages that people are getting from people who were in their support network.
yeah,
Sometimes those relationships don't survive this experience as well.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
That makes
So it's
sense.
again, so people who are estranged from family, it's very common that they have lost, friends or extended family members through that process as well, both from those people just not being able to be supportive of them. Um,
Hmm.
but also sometimes what happens in families is if you cut ties with one or two family members, you'll find that other family members are essentially cutting ties with you because it's like they have to take sides within the
Yes,
family.
yes,
And there can be a
yes.
lot of pressure that's put on other family members to cut you out because, again, you're
You're the
scapegoated.
problem.
You're the bad one. You're the one who's hurting the family, destroying, everything that we have here, being disloyal, things like that.
Yes.
So again, I mean, it is just extremely painful and very lonely experience for a lot of people going through that because they lose so much of their support network and the social connections that they have.
Oh, yeah. No, I have seen that more often than once with not just friends, but with clients that I've worked with, that the sort of domino effect of, yes, cutting the one or two, whatever it is, choosing to cut out the family members that are hurtful, but then losing other relationships in the family associated with them. Yeah, the taking sides, but also this whole message of like, yeah, you're the problem. You're
Yeah.
the one that needs to suffer because you're making this a bigger deal than it really is.
Right. And then when we really look at the dynamics in dysfunctional families, what we see is this scapegoating is a very common occurrence. It is a way for that dysfunctional family system to keep on being dysfunctional because
Mm,
instead of actually addressing the problems that are going on in the family, what they
right.
do is they find one person to blame for it all. And again, it just becomes a way to not have to deal with it, to not talk about it, to not problem solve, to not address what actually is going on, which, might be something like use problems or abuse in the family. Um,
Mental health
right,
problems.
mental health problems that aren't being dealt with. Again,
Yeah,
a whole variety and often a combination of those things that people
for
just
sure.
are like, pushing under the rug. And we're going to say, oh,
As
that's
long
not
as the
happening.
family,
But instead, right, but
yeah.
the person who's trying to call it out and say, I think there's some other things going on here becomes the one who's identified as the problem, the
Oh,
troublemaker.
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and I feel like for, I mean, highly sensitive women in particular, but highly sensitive people, that's like it's difficult enough to be in relationship with an abusive or toxic person because we feel so deeply that those wounds go even deeper. We can't just like be like, oh, that's just them. It hurts
Right.
to our core. But then to then be scapegoated and pointed out as the problem, it's just reinforcing like maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm making too big a deal about this. Maybe I am too sensitive versus like, no, this is really hurtful and painful and I need to do this to survive.
Yeah, it really becomes a form of gaslighting, I think.
Oh, yeah.
The way that you described it really feels that way. Um, because again, it's almost like there's sort of a manipulation of your sensitivity in that
Mm-hmm.
situation, right? To say, oh
Mm-hmm.
yes, you're being too sensitive here is another way of saying there's no problem here when there is a problem. Right? And they're trying to
Yes.
convince you that there's no problem or you're the problem.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. Yes. Oh, gosh. So in the book, what are some of the tools or strategies? Like how is the book framed to help people who are going through this process?
yeah, so I've laid out the book in three different sections. So the first section is really helping people to accept, I would say, both the decision making process of
Mm,
coming to terms with, I need to cut ties, or it doesn't have to be completely. A lot of what I talk about in the book really is applicable to people who also want to have sort of low contact or just take some space from the relationship and they need, to put some distance there.
mm-hmm,
But so that first section is helping people to understand and come to terms with what has been going on in these relationships that has brought them to this point. And then we're sort of wrestling with how do I make peace with the decision? So
mm,
that's that first acceptance piece. And then the second part of the book is about healing. And so this is talking about healing from the experience of the estrangement, but also, of course, the reasons that led up to the estrangement. So again, we could sort of broadly categorize these as traumatic experiences that people have been through because people are not cutting ties when there have been only good experiences in their family,
that
right?
that is
Right.
very true.
It's by its nature is you have been through a lot of difficult experiences. You have been harmed and mistreated in these relationships. And so, that causes emotional damage to us. So there's a healing that needs to happen. And so part of this is grieving
Mm,
for what has been lost, or even grieving what we wanted in our family, but
oh
now is
yeah.
never going to be possible because we're not in touch with them.
Yeah.
It's dealing with and healing a lot of the painful emotions that come with these experiences. So things like again, the guilt and the shame and anger, thinking about topics like forgiveness and what do we do with that. Um, it's learning to take care of ourselves, to nurture ourselves, to create healthy habits. It's about building a new support network or strengthening what's left of the support network so we can again get the emotional and practical support that we need to get through this.
Hmm.
And then the last section of the book is what I call thriving. And
Nice.
this is about how do I live my life fully? It's about living as your authentic self. It's about developing healthy relationships, maintaining boundaries. And it's also about how do I navigate some of the ongoing challenges that happen when we're estranged from our families. And these are things like how do we get through the holidays? What about
Mm.
family events or special occasions? How do I talk to my children about this experience or my partner? So some of the things that come up in the course of living our lives
Yeah.
because of the estrangement.
Yeah. 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 Well, one thing you said was like that forgiveness piece. Like
Mm,
it's that is a thing that I find like I understand the idea that forgiveness allows you to sort of free yourself from whatever angst and frustration or anger that you have. And yet, there's also an undercurrent of you need to forgive this person for doing these terrible things to you without the healing, right? That has to
yeah.
go with that. Yeah.
Right. And that's such an important piece of it because um the healing in terms of the healing within the relationship has not been able to happen, right? That's
Right.
again, that's why we're not maintaining the relationship with this person. If we had been able to work through the difference and do the healing in a relational way, then maybe the relationship would not be ending. But
Sure.
again, because we're talking about a situation where the relationship is ending, that hasn't been something that's been possible here. So that really puts it in a different category, I think.
Hmm.
And my take on it is um, if forgiveness is a helpful concept for somebody and it feels like working towards forgiveness is therapeutic and is going to help them move forward, then that's fantastic. Is, in my opinion, not necessary for a lot of people. It's understandably a very distasteful notion in this context and not something that feels like it's helpful, and it can actually feel like it's really harmful because of
Sure.
what you were saying that the premise behind it is often you need to get over it
Right.
and
Forget what
you
happened. Go
right
on from,
move
yeah.
forward, and it feels like we're kind of letting people off of the hook for doing wrong when they haven't taken ownership and made any attempt at making amends or
Yeah.
changing
Repairing.
their behavior, yeah, repairing it. So
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
since that's the nature of what's happening here, like I said, I think it's very understandable that for a lot of folks in this situation, they're like, I don't have any interest in forgiving, and I think that's totally fine. I don't think it's necessary. I mean, I think what's probably more important is that we're able to move on from any feelings of anger that we have. Right. We don't want to be trapped in feeling intense anger for a long period of time because then that sort of feels like it can be controlling of us emotionally and not a healthy way.
Right.
Um, but
Right.
I don't think that that needs to be done in a framework of forgiveness.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point though, because right, to stay in that angry place, intensely angry place, one disrupts our system and kind of leaves us kind of in that more traumatized state versus moving on and, being angry, but not letting it control and be a,
Right, right.
yeah,
And I just want to add one piece of that because I think it's important to note too that of course being angry is very both natural and helpful in a situation, right?
Absolutely.
When you have been mistreated,
Yeah.
you should feel angry about that. Right.
Yeah.
Again, like we
We
don't want
need
that
that
to, right?
fierceness,
Yes, we
right?
don't want to, just feel angry all of the time, but it has a place, and it has a place in letting us know that somebody is doing wrong towards us, right? That we're being harmed. And because if you don't ever feel any anger about that, it becomes really hard to speak up and say,
Right.
this is not okay with me. Um,
Hmm.
and anger is not the same as being violent or aggressive towards other people. We're
Yeah.
talking about anger as a feeling that we're having. We don't need to act out our anger, in a way of
In a
hurting other
physical
people,
way
right, in a way that we're hurting other
or
people.
an
But
emotional.
yeah, but
Yeah.
in terms of it being an emotional state, it can be a very healthy and helpful emotion for us to have.
Definitely. Definitely. And one that we as women are not necessarily encouraged to express in yeah, outward ways.
Yeah.
But yes, very important, very important. Um, when you've worked with clients, whether using the book or, and I know we haven't mentioned the book, so cutting ties with your parents, very important. But um, what is some of the growth you've seen when clients are able to, yeah, move forward in healthier ways while maintaining the strict boundaries around parents?
Thank you for that question. I love that so much. Because of course that is the most satisfying part of the work that we do with our clients is really seeing them, right, being able to thrive and to flourish after
Yes.
getting through some challenges. And of course it's not like, we solve the problem, we get through the challenge and it's over and done with. And these
Right.
stages are not, you know,
Necessarily linear.
linear or right, separate from
Yeah.
each other. But definitely when people get through a lot of the healing work and they're sort of moving on from the intense work in that area, I mean, it is amazing and wonderful to see people, both what I sort of describe as this emotional freedom of just sort of being free of um the weight of constantly being on edge, being worried, needing to constantly defend themselves,
Mm,
um, putting so much energy into relationships where they are getting so little in return. And it's been such an emotional drain for so many years that
mm,
people really can reclaim different parts of their lives. Um,
yeah.
I see people who are able to make different decisions for themselves and do things in their lives that they felt, um, stifled, that they weren't able to do things really because on some level they didn't want to anger their parents. And I'm talking about people who are in their 30s and 40s
Yeah.
often.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but realizing that they have been living their lives, whether it's something like how they're going to spend their vacation time, or it's their career choice, or where they're going to live.
Or their
Um,
partner, right?
yeah, there's
Who they
becomes this,
choose.
right, this ability to actually do what they want, or more of that in their lives, in that sort of sense of freedom and autonomy. And like I was
Hmm.
saying, the authenticity to be able to be more truly who they are, um, is amazing. And then I think the other thing is people are able to create healthier relationships in their lives. Sometimes that's healthier relationships with people who are already in their life, whether that's with a partner or another member of the family, perhaps. But again, some of it is, I think, the outgrowth of sort of the healing in general, but learning how to set better boundaries for themselves, being able to take better care of themselves. um, and having greater self-esteem. And that all allows people to, I think, show up in relationships in a different way, to ask for what they need in their relationships, and really just not to settle for being mistreated in their relationships or unappreciated or unseen in their
Yeah.
relationships. It's almost like, um, they sort of raise the bar on what they expect in their relationships. Um, yeah, and I
Yeah.
mean, I have had so many clients who have struggled for a very long time trying to get to the point where they have been able to end a relationship with a parent that was a very dysfunctional relationships. Um, and I think really I can't think of an exception to this, that they have all ultimately said, I'm so glad I finally, took the steps, had the courage to end this relationship. I only wish I had done it years ago.
Yes. 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 Yes.
I
Yes.
mean, I can't promise that everyone will always feel that way. I'm sure there are probably some people who have other regrets. I think regrets are a natural part of life, that we all have regrets about various things.
Sure.
And
Sure.
I don't know that we can completely avoid having regrets, but
No, I
um,
agree.
you
Yeah.
know, in general, my clinical experience with folks has been that um, that yes, that it ends up being a positive for them in their life. And I will also say, I have also had clients who have sort of been through that entire process and really experienced a lot of benefits from taking that space from a parent or a family member. And some of them have actually gone back and had some reconnection with family.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's not mutually exclusive. But again, I think for some people, they know very clearly um, that the best thing is to never have any contact, if that's,
Sure.
something within their control,
Right.
um, with
Right.
certain people. For other people, as their life changes, their circumstances changes, as they change, sometimes it, feels like the right thing to do is to try again, and that's okay too. Um,
Absolutely.
I think it's very much a process that people go through, and it's
Yeah.
hard to say, right, what the end goal is supposed to be, and it's not
Right.
for
It
me to
has,
say, right? I mean, it's really very much, again, I think us, being able to figure out for ourselves what feels like the right path for me. And that's not necessarily going to be, the right thing for somebody else.
sure. Well, and I would imagine, and I think I've seen this in my clients too, who some of them who have come to a place of understanding their own needs. And so when if they do choose to re-engage in those relationships that were estranged, they go in with healthier boundaries and limited expectations of what can happen, and
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I think that's very well said, because that's what I was trying to say, but didn't, which is exactly because of
Of the
that, right, of the growth,
yeah,
the
yeah,
healing that you have done, the new relationship skills that you have done. You don't go back as the same version of yourself, even if you,
exactly.
right, that your parent or your family member is exactly the same as they were previously, you're not the same anymore. And just like you were saying, Biz, is, you're now showing up with different expectations, more realistic expectations, with the better self-care, the better support network, the stronger boundaries, right? So
Yes.
you're able to navigate that in a different way and protect yourself in probably a more effective way. And, most likely if things go south, you're going to notice that real quickly and say, okay, I'm
Yep,
out
I
of
tried.
here, right?
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
yeah, know how to be engaged in just very particular ways, for particular
exactly.
reasons.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So if you had, I don't know, words of wisdom for someone who's just starting this process of sort of evaluating what's next and, you know, finding, feeling compelled that like maybe a break needs to happen. What would you say?
I would say, as I had mentioned earlier, is remember that taking a break can be a healthy choice. It often is framed and feels like it's a negative thing. It's a shutting out. It's even the term distancing, has a negative connotation, I think, to
Yeah.
it. But we want to remember that sometimes taking that space um, gives us clarity. It's not just about, I don't want to see you anymore.
Mm,
You're hurting me. It can be a part of self-reflection and perspective taking, just like other difficult decisions, right? When you're in the midst of it, there's, a lot of chaos and crisis and heartache that you're experiencing day to day. It's very hard to see, I think, sort of on a more rational level, what is going on here. And so if we can sort of step back away
hmm.
from it, give ourselves a break. Um, so I think this may be, at least in part, a long way of saying you don't need to be making a decision that is something like, I'm never going to see my parents again forever.
Right.
Um,
Right.
it can very much be, I'm just deciding for today. This is what I need, is to not talk to them or not see them or not text them. And maybe tomorrow I'm going to make a different decision, and that's okay. Or maybe
Mhm.
it's going to be, I'm going to make the same decision again. And, days
Yeah.
add up and, it becomes clearer that I feel better and this is a good decision for me. Although I wouldn't necessarily say you may not feel better immediately with
Right.
it. Like
Right.
with so many difficult situations and decisions, sometimes we feel worse before we get better.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I mean, I think it's definitely a place for patience and self-compassion. I think, again, anytime we're in a painful situation, it feels like I need to figure this out immediately. I need to know what to do. I need to have the whole, path laid out for me so that I can, know what steps to take. And unfortunately, it doesn't always work that way. A
No.
lot of the times we're sort of
Figuring it
building it
out
as
as we
we
go.
go for
Right.
sure, right? Like I
Yeah.
was saying, I mean, it's like one day might lead to the next and inform the next decision for yourself. Um,
Mhm.
so, we need to give ourselves that grace and um, try to
Yeah.
have the patience. I know it's really hard. It at least is for
Absolutely.
me. I definitely want to know, what do I do and how is this going to work out? Um, and I
Yeah.
think a lot of other people do too. So it's hard to be in that uncertainty, in that ambiguous place of,
Yeah.
is this distancing going to be something that's short term or long term? Are we going to resolve things? Will my parents ever change? All of those kinds of questions. It's totally normal to want answers and to know what the outcome is going to be, but there's no rushing ahead, to the end
Right.
of the story. It's like
Yeah.
you got to just keep
Taking those
living it,
steps.
right? And yeah,
Right.
exactly. And keep asking yourself, okay, what is it that I need right now? What is going
Mhm.
to support me, my mental health, my physical health, my personal growth, my goals? And how can I get more of that? How can I do more of the things that are going to support me? And remembering that that's always the right thing to do. I mean,
Mhm.
it's never wrong to take care of yourself,
No. Never, never, never. Yeah. Yeah.
right? Despite, again, what your family may have told you or what the rest of the world may be telling you. Because again, I mean, sometimes that can be a pretty radical thing to do, right?
Oh, totally.
Yeah, when
Totally.
all the messages are you should be self-sacrificing, you should be putting your family first, right? You should be doing what everybody else wants. The idea of prioritizing your own needs and
Oh, and
Self-care
those
is
messages around that can be pretty harsh, right? Yeah, like, yeah, you're selfish. You are, yeah, you are whatever. Yeah,
Yeah.
I have
Again, it's like
heard
we
that
were talking about earlier. I think it's that combination of the big messaging that we get from society, some of that gender specific, women in particular are often expected to be self-sacrificing and putting
for sure.
themselves last.
Yep.
And then it's often very much the messaging that you got within that dysfunctional family system, which,
Yep.
you were told all of these things so that that system could continue to do, operate in the way that it's been operating,
Right.
without, you asking for anything, right? Or asking for anything to be different there.
Yeah.
So there's a
Yeah.
lot of forces working against us. And
Mhm.
it's tough. But
Yeah.
the other thing that I mean, I feel like I say all the time is, um, baby steps. They really add up.
Yes.
We don't need to change everything all at once and um, do everything today, even though, again, it may feel like, I should or I want to in some
Right.
ways.
I need to have all the answers today, but
Right, right. Or I need to, yes, change all of these, behaviors and, ways of thinking that haven't served me well. But really, it's much more sustainable if we're able to just build on, one small change and then the next small change. Um,
yeah,
and the other thing is, often we can feel quite a lot better from some modest changes too.
that's
It's
so true.
we don't
Yeah.
always have to, sort of have 100% of the changes that we're looking for. I mean, that might be sort of more longer term goals for people, but
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Even
yeah,
smaller steps can create growth and healing. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Sharon, always so nice to reconnect with you. And um, yeah, if the listeners want to know how to get your books, how to find you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. My website is livewellwithsharonmartin.com, and there people can find information about my books. I've got lots of articles and free worksheets and various things there,
Yeah, you've
resources
got a
for
lot
folks.
of good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoy I enjoy creating things.
Yeah.
So that's all there, and from there people can find me on social media, sign up for my newsletter, anything that they're interested in. So that's a
Yeah.
great place. Yeah, thank you.
I was going to say you've got a lot of great Instagram content that I always enjoy
Oh, thank you.
seeing.
Thank
So
you.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and my books are, they can be found at any major bookstore,
Bookseller.
ordered for you. Yeah. Um,
Nice. Nice. And so tell us the title of the most recent book once more.
it's Cutting Ties with Your Parents.
There you go. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time. And I know we'll be connecting out there in the universe in other ways, but it's great to have you here.
Thank you. Appreciate it.